The faint hum of my electric heater filled the cramped silence of my apartment as I slouched on my worn-out couch, flipping lazily through a wrinkled car magazine. October was nearing its end, and the cold had begun to creep into the city's bones. Outside my window, the first flakes of snow danced in the dim glow of streetlights, signaling the merciless winter that lay ahead. Life wasn't easy for me. I worked long hours at the warehouse, hauling crates and enduring the biting chill that seeped through the thin walls of the loading docks. But despite the physical toll, I always made sure one thing remained constant: my family's heating bill. For 2 years, I had been their silent savior, funneling $6,000 annually from my hard-earned paychecks to keep their house warm during the brutal winters. It was a sacrifice I had accepted without complaint, until now. The shrill ring of my phone shattered the quiet. I pressed the speaker button, bracing myself for another mundane conversation about a jammed garage door or a clogged drain. Instead, my father's voice cut through like a jagged blade. "Barbara," he said, his tone casual and dismissive, "you're not coming to Thanksgiving this year." I froze, the magazine slipping from my fingers and scattering across the faded cushions. My breath hitched, and for a moment the world seemed to tilt off its axis. "What?" I managed to choke out, my voice rough like corroded metal scraping together. He let out that long, exasperated sigh he always used to sidestep arguments. "Janice has been tense lately. You know how she is. She doesn't want any stress, and neither do we. It's just easier if you sit this one out." "Sit this one out," I repeated, the words sinking into my lungs like ash. My pulse quickened, a sharp heat twisting up my spine. "You're telling me I'm being excluded from our family's Thanksgiving because Janice is feeling overwhelmed?" His tone remained steady, cold, and final. "Don't blow this out of proportion, Barbara. It's just one day. You'll be fine." "One day," I echoed, my voice sharpening like a blade against stone. "And the $6,000 I've been spending to keep your house warm all year, that means nothing too, does it?" Silence stretched between us, the phone line crackling faintly before he finally muttered, "Let's not make this about that. You offered to help." I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that sliced through the peeling walls of my apartment. "Offered?" I stood up, the floor creaking beneath me. "I've been covering your heating bill for 2 years, $6,000 just this year, because you and Mom couldn't handle the cost after Janice's disaster drained you dry. But sure, I begged to do it." He grunted, irritation lacing his voice. "We appreciate it, Barbara, but this isn't about money. It's about family. Janice needs this right now. She's in a fragile state." I walked to the window, watching the snowflakes scatter against the glass, faint under the glow of streetlights blurring through the evening haze. "Fragile," I murmured, letting the words sit cold and heavy like the frost outside. Janice always needed something, and I was always the one paying the price. But not this time. "Enjoy your drama-free dinner," I snapped, jabbing at the screen to end the call. I tossed my phone onto the couch, its display as dark as my breath fogging in the dim light. Janice, the golden child. Prom queen, Mom's pride at the bakery counter, Dad's little dreamer. Even when her dreams collapsed 2 years ago, burning through their savings, $20,000 gone in a failed online boutique she swore would change everything, she still reigned supreme. Unsold inventory sat rotting in a damp storage unit while Mom cried into her tea and Dad shrugged, saying, "She'll recover." I hadn't argued. I had just stepped up, taken over their heating expenses because winters here were merciless, and they couldn't afford fuel without me. $500 a month, $6,000 a year, wired straight from my warehouse paychecks. Meanwhile, Janice posted pictures of rooftop drinks and designer coats she hadn't earned. Until now. Until Dad told me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving, the one day we all showed up no matter what. I reached for my laptop on the messy shelf, sinking back into the couch as its worn frame groaned beneath me. Logging into the utility account I had set up for them, I stared at the screen. My name was on it. I had been the one calling the oil company, scheduling deliveries, making payments, because Dad couldn't figure out the online system, and Mom had simply smiled and said, "You're just so good at this, Barbara." There it stood, $6,000 drained away this year. Each penny carved from my extra hours, my aching joints, my pre-dawn shifts spent laboring in the warehouse's bitter chill. I pressed cancel service, my touch unwavering as the thickening snowfall blurred the world outside, a silent guarantee of the freezing days ahead. A notification appeared on the screen. Service discontinued effective November 1st. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I snapped the laptop shut, a grim grin tugging at the corners of my mouth. Let's see just how fragile Janice feels when the warmth disappears. The first week of November hit like a sledgehammer. The thermostat in my apartment read a cozy 72 degrees Fahrenheit, but outside, the world had transformed into an icy wasteland. Snow piled high against the sidewalks, and the wind howled through the alleys like a wounded animal. I didn't need to check the news to know that temperatures had plummeted earlier than usual this year. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from my family, each one more frantic than the last. "Barbara, what did you do?" My mother's text came through first, her words trembling with panic. It's freezing here. Why isn't the heat working? A few minutes later, another message popped up. Your father is furious. Call us immediately. I stared at the screen, my lips curling into a bitter smile. Furious? After years of funneling my hard-earned money into their comfort, they were furious because I finally stopped? The call started soon after. My father's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and accusing. What game are you playing, Barbara? Why did you cancel the heating service? It wasn't a game, I replied coolly, leaning back on my couch. I just decided it was time for someone else to take over. Take over? He snapped, his tone rising. You think we can afford this? You've been paying for 2 years, you can't just pull the plug now. Oh, I can, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. And if you're so desperate, maybe Janice should sell some of those designer coats she loves so much. They might keep you warm. He hung up without another word, but the barrage didn't stop there. Texts poured in, each one more dramatic than the last. Janice posted a vague rant on social media. Some people only care about themselves. Family means nothing anymore. Her followers flooded the comments with sympathy, none of them knowing, or caring, that I was the one who had kept their precious house warm for years. Meanwhile, my family scrambled to cope with the biting cold. Mom wrapped herself in layers of blankets, shivering as she tried to cook meals on a tiny portable gas stove. Dad rummaged through the attic, pulling out old furniture and knickknacks to sell online. But even after selling a dusty antique lamp and a set of mismatched china plates, the money barely covered a single tank of heating oil. Janice, ever the drama queen, packed a suitcase and stormed out of the house, declaring she'd stay with friends until things got better. She didn't last long. By midnight, she returned, pale and defeated, dragging her suitcase behind her like a ghost haunting the hallway. Their struggles played out in real time on my phone. Olivia, my cousin, sent updates almost daily. Janice is losing her mind, she wrote one evening. She keeps yelling at your dad, saying it's all your fault. Meanwhile, your mom is wrapped up like a burrito and refuses to leave the living room. I scrolled through the messages, my chest tightening slightly, not out of guilt but out of something darker. Satisfaction. For years, I had carried the weight of their comfort on my shoulders, sacrificing my own peace for theirs. Now, as they stumbled through the consequences of their choices, I felt a strange sense of vindication. Still, the constant notifications were starting to wear on me. To escape the noise, I met Brian for lunch at a diner near my apartment. He was an old friend from high school, someone I hadn't seen in years but who always seemed to understand me better than most. You seem different, he said as we sat down, his brow furrowing slightly. What's going on? I hesitated, then launched into the story. I told him about the Thanksgiving exclusion, the $6,000 I'd spent annually on heating, and my decision to cut them off. His expression shifted from concern to amusement, and by the end he was laughing so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. That's cold, Barbara. Literally. Love it, he said, wiping tears from his eyes. But honestly, they had it coming. You've been bending over backward for them for years. It's about time you stood up for yourself. His words were exactly what I needed to hear. As I walked back to my apartment later that afternoon, the contrast between my life and theirs couldn't have been starker. Inside my home, warmth radiated from every corner, a stark reminder of the luxury I had provided them for so long. Outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the city under its unforgiving blanket. Back in my apartment, I poured myself a cup of tea and settled onto the couch. My phone buzzed again, another plea from my mother. I silenced it without reading, letting the quiet envelop me. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. As Thanksgiving loomed closer, the storm outside grew fiercer, swallowing the world in a suffocating blanket of white. Inside my apartment, the warmth was a constant cocoon, wrapping me in comfort while I imagined my family shivering under layers of blankets, their breath fogging in the icy air. My phone buzzed incessantly, texts from Mom, voicemails from Dad, Janice's dramatic rants flooding my notifications. Each message painted a picture of escalating desperation. The thermostat had dropped below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, Mom was coughing uncontrollably, and Dad had sold off his prized antique tools for a pittance that barely covered a single oil delivery. But none of it moved me. I sipped my coffee, watching steam curl lazily into the air as their pleas scrolled across my screen. Barbara, please, Mom's latest text read. I'm sick. We can't go on like this. I set the mug down, my fingers brushing against the warm ceramic. Let them stew in their own mess, I thought. They made their bed, now they could freeze in it. Then came the night when the storm reached its peak, a blizzard howling with such ferocity that even the city seemed to hold its breath. Around midnight, the doorbell rang. Startled, I glanced through the peephole and saw him. My father, hunched against the wind, snow crusting his coat like frost on an old tree. His face was pale, drawn tight with exhaustion, and his hands trembled as he clutched the railing of my porch. I opened the door just wide enough to peer out, the heat from my apartment spilling onto the frozen stoop. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot and pleading. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the relentless shriek of the wind tearing through the streets. "Barbara," he finally said, his voice hoarse and strained. "The house, it's unbearable. Your mother is sick. She's been coughing all night. We didn't think it would get this bad." I leaned casually against the door frame, arms crossed, my expression unreadable. "Didn't think?" I repeated, letting the words hang in the frigid air. "You told me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving. Said it was better to keep Janice comfortable. Now you're standing here begging me to fix your problems?" His jaw clenched, frustration flickering across his face. "That was one day, Barbara. One day. Do you really hate us so much that you'd let your own mother suffer? The house is freezing. It's dropping below 35 degrees Fahrenheit inside." I took a step forward, closing the gap between us. My voice was calm but sharp, cutting through the storm like a blade. "And whose fault is that? I paid $6,000 this year alone to keep your house warm. 2 years in a row. While Janice posted selfies in designer coats she couldn't afford. And what did I get in return? Exclusion. Dismissal. You chose her over me. So now you deal with the consequences." He flinched, his shoulders sagging under the weight of guilt, or maybe it was just the cold. "We never meant for it to come to this," he muttered, his tone softer now, almost desperate. "Your mother is miserable. Janice ran off again. We're falling apart without you." I stared at him, my gaze unyielding. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't worth inviting to Thanksgiving. I'm done cleaning up after all of you." His fists clenched, shaking with anger, or perhaps the biting chill. "We don't have any money left, Barbara. I've sold everything valuable. There's nothing else to sell." "Not my problem," I replied flatly, my voice colder than the storm raging outside. "You made your choice. Now live with it." For a moment he stood there, his chest heaving, his breath visible in the frosty air. Then, with a final, defeated glare, he turned and trudged back toward his truck, his boots crunching heavily in the snow. I watched him go, the faint glow of his taillights disappearing into the swirling whiteout. Closing the door, I leaned against it, listening to the muffled roar of the storm outside. The warmth of my apartment enveloped me once more, a stark contrast to the icy chaos beyond my walls. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of his silhouette fading into the distance, swallowed by the relentless snowfall. Thanksgiving arrived amidst the blizzard, the city buried under feet of snow. I spent the evening alone, enjoying a modest meal of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes and canned green beans. The table was small, the atmosphere quiet, but it was mine, all mine. No forced smiles, no passive-aggressive comments from Janice, no guilt trips from Mom or dismissive remarks from Dad. Just peace. Meanwhile, I pictured their dinner table, a scene of misery. Mom bundled in sweaters, coughing weakly. Dad slicing into an overcooked turkey, his face etched with frustration. Janice sulking in the corner, her expensive coat doing little to shield her from the biting cold. Their home, once warm and inviting, was now a prison of ice. My phone buzzed again, another wave of frantic messages flooding in. Mom's texts were desperate, Janice's accusatory, Dad's furious. But I silenced the notifications, setting the device aside. Let them figure it out, I thought. I had already walked away from the role of their savior. As the storm raged on outside, I curled up on my couch, a steaming cup of tea in hand. The heater hummed softly in the background, a reminder of the warmth I had provided them for years, and the warmth they had taken for granted. The weeks that followed Thanksgiving were a blur of relentless cold and mounting desperation. My phone buzzed incessantly with frantic messages from my family, each one painting a picture of their unraveling lives. Mom was drowning in guilt, Dad was selling off the last of his prized possessions, and Janice had become a ghost of her former self. Her designer coats couldn't shield her from the biting frost anymore, and she had resorted to couch surfing with friends who barely tolerated her presence. But it wasn't until mid-December, when the snow had piled high enough to bury the city in silence, that the true extent of their collapse became undeniable. Olivia called me one afternoon as I sat by my window, sipping tea and watching the world freeze over. "Barbara," she said, barely containing her laughter, "they're falling apart. Janice is ranting online about how you've ruined her life. Mom's sobbing to Aunt Anna, saying she can't sleep because of the cold. And Dad? He's out there begging neighbors for spare heaters. It's chaos." I smirked, leaning back against the cushions. "Good. Let them figure it out." Olivia snorted. "You're savage, you know that? You're like the queen of icy revenge. Literally." Her words made me chuckle, but the humor faded quickly as I heard a knock at my door later that evening. Peering through the peephole, I froze. There stood my mother, her once proud posture now hunched and broken. Snow dusted her scarf, and her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She looked like a stranger, small, fragile, and utterly defeated. I hesitated before opening the door, letting the heat from my apartment spill into the icy hallway. She didn't speak right away, just stared at me with trembling lips and tear-streaked cheeks. Finally, her voice cracked through the silence. "Barbara," she whispered, her tone heavy with regret. "We made a mistake. It's been miserable, the cold, the fighting. We never realized how much you did for us. I crossed my arms, my expression unreadable. You never noticed, I replied evenly. 2 years, $6,000 this year alone. Until I stopped. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edges of her coat. You put Janice first again. I'm done cleaning up after you. She stepped closer, desperation etched into every line of her face. We're sorry, Barbara. Janice is too. Can we fix this? My gaze hardened, ice meeting fire. Not now. I'm warm. You figure it out. With that, I closed the door, leaving her standing in the freezing hallway. Through the peephole, I watched her shoulders slump, her small frame silhouetted against the dim light of the corridor. She lingered for a moment, then turned and walked away, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of snow. Back inside, I returned to my couch, cradling my mug of tea. The warmth of my apartment enveloped me, a stark contrast to the icy storm raging outside, and within my family. My phone buzzed again, another call from Olivia. They're completely wrecked, she said, her voice tinged with both amusement and disbelief. Janice got kicked out of her friend's place and is crashing on some guy's couch. Mom's stuck in a cheap motel, and Dad's selling off everything he owns just to keep the house from freezing. You've completely shattered them, Barbara. I exhaled slowly, steam rising from my tea. They built that world, I said firmly. I just stopped heating it. Olivia laughed, sharp and wild. You're ruthless. Good thing I'm not on your bad side. As the call ended, I leaned back, letting the silence settle around me. Outside, the wind howled through the streets, carrying with it the weight of their downfall. But inside, I was untouchable, a fortress of warmth and resolve. The new year arrived with a quiet stillness, as if the world itself had paused to catch its breath. Outside my window, the snow lay undisturbed, a pristine blanket muffling the chaos of the city. Inside my apartment, warmth radiated from every corner, a stark contrast to the frozen turmoil that had consumed my family. I sat by the heater, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, and allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. No more late-night calls begging for money. No more guilt trips disguised as concern. No more sacrificing my peace for their comfort. My life was mine again, a sanctuary untainted by their demands. The silence around me was not empty, it was full, brimming with the weight of my independence. Meanwhile, my family's descent into chaos continued unabated. Olivia kept me updated, her tone oscillating between amusement and disbelief. Your dad sold his old record player last week, she told me during one call. You know, the one he swore he'd never part with? He got $20 for it. I chuckled softly, but there was no cruelty in my laughter, only a detached acknowledgement of the consequences they had brought upon themselves. And Janice? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She's couch surfing with some guy named Kyle, Olivia replied, her voice tinged with mockery. Apparently, she's been sleeping on his floor because he won't let her share the bed. It's pathetic. And Mom? There was a pause before Olivia spoke again, her tone softening slightly. She's staying with Aunt Anna now. Keeps talking about how much she regrets everything. She even cried during Christmas dinner, saying she wishes you'd forgive her. I set my mug down, staring at the steam curling lazily into the air. Forgiveness wasn't something I could, or wanted, to give. They had chosen Janice over me again and again, until I became invisible to them. Now they were reaping what they had sown. But as satisfying as it was to see them unravel, I couldn't deny the faint ache in my chest whenever I thought about Mom. Her trembling voice, her tear-streaked face, it lingered in my mind like a ghost I couldn't exorcise. Still, I reminded myself of the years I had spent carrying their burdens, only to be cast aside when it suited them. This pain was theirs to bear, not mine. One evening, as I sat reading by the glow of my bedside lamp, I found myself thinking about the choices that had led me here. For so long, I had believed that sacrifice was love, that enduring their neglect and ingratitude was proof of my loyalty. But now I understood the truth. Love without boundaries is not love at all. It is servitude. They chose Janice, I murmured aloud, closing my book and setting it aside. But I chose myself. The realization washed over me like warm sunlight breaking through winter clouds. I had spent years bending over backward to keep them comfortable, only to be treated as expendable. Now I stood tall, unyielding and whole. My decision to cut them off had been an act of survival, an assertion of my worth in a world that had tried to diminish it. As the days turned into weeks, I began to embrace my newfound freedom fully. I redecorated my apartment, filling it with plants and colorful throw pillows. I took long walks in the park, letting the crisp air invigorate my lungs. I even started dating again, meeting someone who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could provide. In contrast, my family's lives spiraled further into disarray. Dad sold off the last of his prized possessions, only to realize it would never be enough. Mom lived in borrowed spaces, burdened by guilt and shame. And Janice, once the golden child, wandered aimlessly, her pride shattered and her dreams reduced to dust. Through it all, I remained untouched, a fortress of warmth and resolve. The lessons I had learned were etched into my soul. Boundaries are necessary, self-worth is sacred, and sometimes the hardest decisions bring the greatest freedom. As I stood by my window one final time, watching the snow fall gently onto the quiet streets below, I whispered a silent goodbye to the past. They chose Janice, I said softly, but I chose myself, and that choice saved me. The message was clear. Personal boundaries are essential. Sacrifice does not mean enduring injustice forever. Sometimes to survive you must let go of what weighs you down, and rise above it.